With the NFL draft now completed, the big question is, has Cincinnati put Joe Burrow in position to succeed after the draft? With the NFL draft completed, as we mentioned, it feels like the sentiment around Cincinnati feels nothing like a team that just came off its worst season since 2002, but instead, it feels like there's a lot of people with really high hopes and high expectations for this team going forward in the next season, and I personally am one of them. And here's yet another big reason as to why. On the Rap Sheet and Friends podcast, Joe Burrow was asked about if he felt he was put in position to succeed in Cincinnati, and his response to that question was this: it does, and I think the direction that they're heading in is going to fit me even more. They're going to do things that I'm comfortable with, and that's a great sign. They had me put down my 10 top plays that I had and sent it into them so they can study them and see if they can have them in the offense if they don't currently have them in it, close quote. And the key thing for me to note here is Burrow is giving them his 10 favorite plays to run essentially here. That is monumental if you ask me. Taylor and Callahan going out there and putting in an effort to make Burrow as comfortable as possible and playing to his strengths. I cannot stress enough why I believe Bill Belichick is one of the greatest, if not the greatest coach of all time in football. What has made the Patriots so successful over these past 2 decades is Belichick goes out there, he takes every single player he has on that team, and he makes the most of them. You look at why this team's always you want to play the fantasy game, why it's always a fantasy nightmare with this team with running backs, because he'll use every single running back on that lineup at the best of their ability, whether he's got your between the tackles guy, your catch out of the field guy, your blocking, whatever. He will find the players and use them to their strengths. He doesn't go into the season and say, all right, here's the system we're running. It's worked for me before. We're going to make it work again this season. No, he's willing to evolve. He's willing to make changes that fit his team the most in order to help them win ball games. I mean, let's bring up some examples of how it can be a nightmare. Look at Cam Newton. Remember when he won the MVP? Remember when this guy was one of the most unstoppable players in the league, 15-1 Carolina Panthers? Remember when the coach then said, hey Cam, we don't want you to take all these shots anymore. We don't want you running the ball as much. We want you to become a passing out of the pocket type of quarterback. How did that work? How did that work not playing a Cam Newton style there? What about Lamar Jackson? What if Coach Harbaugh didn't go into last season and say, we're committing to playing to Lamar Jackson's strength, which is him scrambling, him running the ball. We're going to become a run-heavy team. We are going to become the most dominant run team in the league, and it's just going to make it that much easier because this team's going to be crowding the box. They're going to be spying on Lamar all game for him to go out there and throw for 5 touchdowns in a game. Makes it easy for him. They played to his strengths, and look what happened. So it is music to my ears to hear that Zach Taylor, again, it's early, but it's Zach Taylor going out there and saying, hey, guess what? We see you, Joe Burrow. We're not going to go and say we figured it out at the end of last season, or we figured out what we wanted to do 3 seasons ago, whatever it is. We are going to implement a system that fits you the best, and we're going to start by going out there and looking into plays that you ran well in college, make it an easier, shouldn't say easy, there's nothing easy about going to college and the NFL, but make it an easier transition for you to go to the NFL with set amount of plays that you can now run in the back of your mind and say, okay, these are plays that, I'm comfortable with. Get the confidence going in games per se. I love it. But I will pump the brakes a little bit here. It's great to be excited, super pumped to see what this team can do. But you do have to remember, this is the same Zach Taylor who was heavily outcoached in a lot of games last season. Personal opinion, I don't know if it's a personal opinion. You watch some of the games. We can talk about different games all the time that are still glaring concerns. For example, the Arizona game, worst pass defense in the league against a tight end. A Bengals tight end didn't even get targeted the entire first half. And then there's other games. Bengals played great in the first half. You see them come to the second half. We don't make adjustments. The other team does, and they just pick the Bengals apart and they fall to pieces in the second half. That is, textbook. Coaches not, adjusting on the fly or, getting out coached in general. And we talk about playing to players' strengths. I don't think anybody has a question about it. Andy Dalton throwing the ball 50 times in a game is not playing to anybody's strength there. And not running the ball with Joe Mixon more is the same exact story. And we've seen that heavily in that first half of the season last year. But all that being said, it was Coach Taylor's first time taking over such a major role for an NFL team. I think you have to expect growing pains out of a coach like that. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I love the signing of Taylor when it happened. I would much rather have somebody like Zach Taylor, fresh to the head coaching job, come in here and either A, learn on the fly like he has, and B, bring in some sort of different, persona or mindset or system to a team, as opposed to bringing in a head coach that's been fired 3 times for a good reason. He was fired in the first place. Why sign a guy that lost his job? So I love this signing, and I'm all for giving this guy a year to learn and get better, and I think this will be a big step, not just for the team, but for him this season. And again, all that being said, it was a rough season. This is a team that went 14 games without putting up more than 30 points. They did it twice, both games to end the season. This is a team that allowed 8 sacks in the final 5 games of the season. They allowed 40 in the first 11 games. 5 of the first 6 games of the season, the Bengals went without running the ball 20 plus times. The final 10 games, they didn't go a single game without running the ball 20 plus times. 8 of the Bengals' losses were by 1 possession. As rough as the season was and as hard as it was to watch, there were, you could say there was some decision making, some bad play calling, or just some, bad, plays by the team in general, whatever it is. In 1 possession games, though, you're in those games. It's easy to go back and say, hey, this Bengals team, a couple different things went a different way. Could have won 6, 7 games, maybe 5 or 6. But what I'm looking at here is understanding there was improvement. There was improvement throughout the season. It wasn't the greatest season. They got better though, and I think a lot of that, was Taylor learning, like, hey, what worked in LA isn't gonna work with Andy Dalton. I gotta, change things up a little bit here and learn on the go. He didn't stay, okay, I'm gonna stick with throwing the ball 50 times all season. He wasn't stubborn about it. He was open to change. That's a great sign if you ask me. But I do want to go back to the sacks allowed by the Bengals these final 5 games. There was no question that the offensive line struggled mightily during portions of the season, but to finish the season on the strong note that they did, to see guys like Fred Johnson come in and play very well, granted a small sample size, to still have a young Billy Price that could still work his way into the starting lineup, to see Jonah Williams expected to be healthy and ready to roll, and the ultimate wild card here, I think, Xavier Su'a-Filo, who I think we need to quit looking at on the negative side of things and saying, oh, he was a backup lineman for the Dallas Cowboys, and realize this guy was a backup offensive lineman for the best offensive line in the NFL, arguably for how many years now? One of the best, at least, if not the best. That Cowboys line, it's a solid bunch. And at the end of the day, look at it as you will, he had a time to just sit there and learn from these guys. You can take in a lot from watching and learning a Dallas Cowboys offensive line operate. So the big question is going to be, is he going to be better going into next season? Is he going to be hungry? He's going to look at this as an opportunity to go out there, prove himself, and become a starter for this Bengals offensive line and become a key piece to it as well? We don't know. Those are wild cards, but it's a lot of hidden potential right there, I think, and I love every bit about it. But at the end all be all, I think you look at this offensive line and say they are more than capable of being a solid bunch next season. A vastly improved line from, this previous season at the very least, which is, I think, what you look for here. I'm not going to go out there and say we're the Dallas Cowboys or a Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line. That's not going to happen. That's not, realistic. But what this team can do is be a solid offensive line, an offensive line that's middle of the pack in the league and, protects Joe Burrow enough that gives him enough time to go out there and pick apart teams in the meantime, not being so bad where he's, getting pressured every single time, which I think can be detrimental to the growth of a quarterback. But instead he's gonna, he's gonna have time back there, at least a lot of the time, I should say, compared to being consistently pressured, which would again be a little bit detrimental. So yeah, there's a lot of hidden pieces here for the Bengals, and it's tough to look at a Bengals draft and say, could you imagine going into it and not taking an offensive lineman until deep into the draft? And you'd be like, oh, okay, that's not really, I don't know how I feel about that. But then you watch them do it. They take go linebacker heavy. They get a good weapon in T. Higgins, and you know what? I loved it. I loved every bit of this Bengals draft. That was one of the best draft classes I think I've seen out of them in a long time here. So with all that in mind, it does, as much as I wanted to see the Bengals go offensive line early, it makes sense why they didn't. Instead of reaching for a guy in the second round that, was probably deeper on their board, in a lineman, they said, let's grab a steal of a player here in T. Higgins and provide yet another weapon for Joe Burrow and make this team absolutely killer. There's no other way to put it. This team has killer potential through the air. AJ Green, Tyler Boyd. You're talking about having Tyler Boyd as your number 3 guy. He was your number 1 the entire season pretty much last season, and he did a really good job at it. You talk about John Ross, Auden Tate, guys that can be difference makers on this team. There is a lot of talent from the wide receiver corps here in Cincinnati. And again, Joe Mixon, we talk about this guy is a phenomenal running back, and he is more than capable of being that guy that alleviates the pressure from Joe Burrow. If they need to go run heavy a couple games to start the season, get Burrow's feet wet, Joe Mixon is more than capable of toting that load and alleviating that pressure. So the answer is yes. I do think it's a simple yes, too, that this Bengals team was built to help Joe Burrow succeed in the future, and there's no question about it. There's talent everywhere. They got the running game. The biggest concern right now is how's he going to transition? How's Coach Taylor going to implement him into the offense? And how does that offensive line hold up? But I think all the potential in the world is there for this team to succeed.